So good morning, members, and welcome to the Audit and Risk Management Committee being held today on Monday, the 12th of January 2026. I can confirm that we are quorate. As you are aware, the public element of today's meeting is being live streamed, and those participating in the meeting have given consent to their inclusion. The recording will be available on the City Corporation's YouTube channel following the meeting, and it should be retained for up to 1 civic year. Chairman.
Thank you, Town Clerk. Before we begin today's agenda, I'd like to formally welcome Alderman Jeanette Newman to the committee. She hasn't been able to make today's committee, but we look forward to her contributions. I would also like to extend our sincere thanks to James St. John Davis for his service to the committee, as he has now stepped down from his role. I should also note that our external member, Dane Worsley, will be stepping down from the committee. Today marks his final meeting with us as he's unable to make the next committee. Then we are grateful for the independence and insight you have brought to our discussions. We wish you every success in the future. Over to you, Town Clerk.
Thank you, Chairman. I will now move on to the agenda. So item 1, we have apologies. I've received apologies from Simon Burrows, and Alderwoman Liz King is observing virtually, as well as Ruby Syed. Do members know of any other apologies? Seeing none. Moving on to item number 2, members' declarations under the Code of Conduct in respect of items on the agenda. I've not received any in advance of the meeting. Do members have any declarations to declare? Seeing none. We therefore move on to item 3. We have the minutes. This is for members to agree the public minutes and non-public summary of the previous meeting held on the 17th of November 2025.
Do members have any matters of accuracy or matters arising from the minutes? If not, can I take them as approved? Thank you. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 4 is the annual review of the committee's terms of reference. As members are aware, all committees review their terms of reference annually. Comments will be returned to the next committee before onward submission to Policy and Resources.
Do members or officers have any comments on the terms of reference? In particular, are there any areas missing or requiring further clarification? I'll just start with the members first. Yes, David.
Thank you, Chair. As a relatively new member, I apologise if I'm just asking some questions which should be obvious. But the independent audit panel, I wasn't sure. I couldn't see reference to that anywhere else. So I was just interested who the independent audit panel was. Moving on to the risk management side of things, I see that part of our remit is to consider any value for money issues arising from the operational activities of the City Corporation. And I just wondered really what that actually kind of meant in practice. Also on the part on I, which is to looking at the management procedures, financial capabilities, controls and safeguarding procedures for the various schools. Controls, I sort of thought that was a little bit vague, and I wasn't quite sure how much our remit follows through for the schools, and I was a bit surprised to see safeguarding procedures in there. Not surprised, but just wonder how we as a committee would be able to really overview those safeguarding procedures. And lastly, on the anti-fraud and anti-corruption arrangements, there's no mention of whistleblowing. And I would have thought that would be, I can't think where that would fall other than within our sort of area. I know probably HR have some issues with that as well. But so sorry, those are my comments and questions.
David, thank you very much. Let's take one of Caroline, please.
Thank you very much for those queries, and one of them relates to an update that I wanted to bring as well. So the internal audit, the independent audit appointment panel, that has now gone. That was a legacy from when we appointed our own auditor for the local authority, and exceptionally we were one of the only authorities in the country to be able to appoint our own, and there was a whole raft of arrangements that had to be put in place to do that. Members have now made the decision to use the public sector advisory audit appointment panels, so it goes through that third party rather than through us. So that can come out and we can delete letter E. In terms of value for money, I think the key thing there, because of course Finance Committee has value for money in its terms of reference in arrangements to secure value for money, but also to probe, and Finance Committee looks at it as well through the Efficiency and Performance Subcommittee. Where issues have been flagged though on value for money, that is the fact that the organisation is not securing it where it should be, and that is within the terms of reference, I think, of the Audit and Risk Management Committee. I think you would need assurance that whatever was put in place to better secure that is actually working. And if there are any themes that are coming out of it, I think that's something this committee really should be probing, as well as finances, if you like, as a scrutiny for it. In terms of the controls over the schools and the anti-fraud and corruption with the whistleblower policy, I'll pass over to Matt.
Thank you. So yeah, just picking up the point about the remit and reference to the schools. I mean, it's possible that the terms of reference don't necessarily need to refer to those, but I think it's there just to make sure that those particular parts of the organisation don't get forgotten about in the broad remit of the committee. So I think the important way to think about this, and there's an alignment with the global internal audit standards on this and the expectations on the committee and the organisation from those standards. In the global standards and the public sector overlay that sits there, the audit committee can serve as the board. So in the standards it refers to the board. Now in our organisation the board is really Court of Common Council. So the Audit and Risk Management Committee gets its authority from Court of Common Council, and the remit of the Audit and Risk Management Committee is across all operations of the City of London Corporation. So basically anything that reports into Court of Common Council is within the scope and remit of this committee. There are some within the institutions and the wider committee structure, there are some subcommittees that actually fulfil some of the responsibilities that can take place at an audit committee level, but providing that sort of scrutiny and oversight, but still like they're sort of considered secondary to the oversight of Audit and Risk Management Committee. Just allows for perhaps a greater level of depth and consideration within that service committee structure. So yeah, there are other operations that are outside of that, but if you think about the things that relate to sort of the three core pillars of the work of my team and my function, which is to provide assurance on the internal control environment, risk management arrangements, and the adequacy and effectiveness of governance, the remit of the committee is the same as that. So I cover all of those things, and therefore the committee has that oversight for that. In relation to the anti-fraud and fraud and anti-corruption arrangements, that does include whistleblowing. So that's covered within the anti-fraud and corruption strategy that we've got, and we do report on activity there. So it's referred to in I guess in more in the policy documents rather than like the remit of the committee.
Thank you. Okay,
Steve.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the clarification from the Chamberlain about the independent audit panel, because I had the same question. Does that mean the version we're looking at right now is completely unamended? Yeah, okay, fine. But can I just ask on the independent panel to appoint the external auditors? We've got PSAA now. Is that for the non-local authority bit as well?
So to clarify that, no, Livery Hall appoints the auditor for City's estate, but that's on the basis of a normal tender process. And of course, City Bridge Foundation Board appoint the auditor for City Bridge, again on the basis of a tender process.
Got it. And then thanks, Chair. I've just a couple more questions then. So this version of the terms of reference doesn't have what might be, well, I think there's an extract from the Constitution included in the full terms of reference, which refers to the independent members of this committee, which I know is coming later on the agenda. So am I correct to assume that we're not at this time proposing to change that bit that is not included in these papers, but it is included in the full terms of reference, or an extract of the Constitution contained therein, which refers to us having 3 independent members? Are we leaving that untouched without wishing to jump too far ahead to a future agenda item? But I think it is relevant to the terms of reference.
Yeah, so I think it's a really good question, and it was something the committee touched on last time. The requirement for 3 was largely because of the independent appointment panel and the need to have a majority of independent members selecting, if you like, the auditor for the local authority side. That, of course, is not required, but it is best practice to have a number of independent members. So in the discussion committee had last time, it was felt that we should stick with 3 and recruit to vacancies as they arise. Of course, it is within the remit of the committee to reflect on that at any point in the future.
Thanks, Chair. And just a couple of quick more points. Timing of meetings or frequency of meetings. I think the only thing that was on my mind, and it'll be on other people's minds as well, is that crunch point that we have in the timetable in September as we get towards the accounts. I don't know if we're going to deal with that here or now, but I think that is something that maybe is an item for the terms of reference. And final point, just to pick up on something David said, I think it would be preferable, Chair, if we explicitly include that reference to whistleblowing. I know it's embedded as you just explained, but it might be helpful just because that's such an obvious area of responsibility that you often see in audit committee terms. So maybe just put the words including whistleblowing into the relevant bit. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. In respect of the value for money assessments, is there a criteria by which matters are referred from the Finance Committee to this committee?
There's no set criteria as such. I think it's really for this committee to consider what it thinks should happen as a result. So if there is an issue over value for money, for instance, it's likely to come as well out of the external audit report. So you would probably want to probe what officers were doing in terms of management recommendations, and then seeking confirmation from Finance Committee that they were putting in place. So Finance Committee would be the committee with the responsibility to make the arrangements to secure that. Your responsibility is looking at the assurance that those are as strong as they should be, bearing in mind the information you've received from external audit and from internal audit, who will also raise those sorts of concerns. Yeah, so the area I just wanted to bring to your attention was on C, and that is right at the end where it says to make recommendations relating to the approval of the accounts to Finance Committee, other than for Bridge House Estates, to also add the City of London Corporation's pension funds. Under government changes, those are now done separately, and so that is to reflect that, and also that would help strengthen arrangements, given that the Deputy Chair of Finance is also the Chief Commercial Officer for the London CIV, the Collective Investment Vehicle. And I think, Dion, you had a change as well you wanted to.
Thank you, Chair, and morning, members. So there are a few things to note that we would hope to put into the terms of reference going forward. Just before I cover those, just wanted to come back to H and the value for money. I think the work of this committee, it's gone much broader than escalating things just on where there's a concern around value for money. Not to do drafting now, but I think something that is looking at any of the risks, particular corporate risks, impact our ability to discharge our operations, our services, our infrastructure and so on and so forth. That's the complete purview of this committee, and I would be nervous about narrowing it down just to value for money when in practice we escalate more than that if needed to Court Common Council. On the other points, so there isn't explicit reference around the annual governance statement, and I would encourage this committee, we do it anyway as part of our kind of audit functions, to make sure that there is explicit reference to that here. And then under risk, again, for the last 24 months, really, this committee has had a particular interest around risk appetite, risk culture, and kind of the responsible senior committee on behalf of COCO for the risk appetite statements. So I think explicit references to those, given that this committee is the custodian, will be important. It shouldn't add too much. I'm very conscious that the terms of reference are at a high level and there'll be policies, guidance and so on that sit behind it, but those are the ones that I wanted to flag here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dion. Sounds good. And yes, Matt, please.
Thank you. Yeah, and just a brief one from me in relation to internal audit. So this relates to point B. The current wording is to commission and receive reports from the Chief Internal Auditor. I would propose wording that sort of more closely aligns with the global internal audit standards, which obviously they're new from the past year anyway, and that would be something more along the lines of approving the mandate for internal audit or providing internal audit with its mandate to operate in accordance with the standards, something to that effect. And that actually aligns with the item we've got on the agenda later, which is the internal audit charter. That's the vehicle by which you advise me to go and deliver internal audit.
Matt, thank you very much. Dion, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry to have two bites of the cherry, but Matt just reminded me of one other thing that I was going to mention. This committee, unlike some of the other committees, also looks into the future. We don't have anything yet at the moment around the terms of reference, which is about that future focus, looking at the trends and so on, that then inform what we're doing around risks and mitigations. It's the bit that we're looking at Chief Officer Risk Management Group to stop us looking just at issues, because if things have already materialised. So we'll work with the clerk just to make sure that the tone in there is also about looking at trends into the future and then working our way back through the lens of risk.
Thank you. Carolyn, please.
Yes, so Chairman, given the number of changes that officers and members have requested, two choices. Does the committee want to see the terms of reference come back here to the next meeting, or are you happy for officers to make those changes and delegate to the chairman the approval of those?
Members, what do you think?
Happy to delegate.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Town Clerk, please.
Thank you, Chair. So moving on to item 5, the outstanding actions of the committee, and this is for information.
Thank you very much. Starting with item 8, Matt, please can you provide some assurance to members on the progress of the overdue recommendations, please?
Yes, thank you. We've done some work over the past few weeks since the committee last met in relation to the open recommendations. Actually, of the overdue high priority recommendations, that number has actually come down significantly, and it also came up further on Friday last week. So we currently have only 6 now that are showing as overdue past their due date. That just to clarify, that is of the high priority. We've got some medium and low, but the committee expressed specific interest in the high priority recommendations. Those we've had engagement with the chief officer. That actually will relate to housing related activity. So it's sort of a fairly well contained area. We've got some assurance from the chief officer that there will be, there's the work in train at the moment to move things along. So we expect to see some progress. The target dates for closing those recommendations is the end of March, so 31st of March this year. In terms of whether like those particular issues will be fully resolved at that point, they may not be, but we will close those recommendations regardless, because we need to incorporate fresh assurance work on those areas. They're areas that are going into our plan for next year. So one was Barbican Estate repairs and maintenance, and the other was fire safety. So they're both actually quite important, significant areas, and it's now been some time since we last looked at that. So our solution actually would be to take forward as further assurance work, but we're still maintaining that contact with the chief officer and the housing team to close, to monitor what actions they're actually taking with respect to the recommendations. And then in terms of the further information that the committee asked for before, it was to capture the dates when we last followed up, and the future date for implementation. I can circulate like the detail of those recommendations between now and the next meeting.
Matt, thank you very much. Caroline.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So I think one of the points members were also raising was how are relevant service committees made aware of the outstanding recommendations, and that's something that the Financial Services Director will pick up with her team, who advise those committees in the reporting that's done on the finances, and understanding the implications of why these are red recommendations or why they're high priority recommendations within that.
Thank you very much. Gail, please.
Thank you, Chair. Matt, I think it's really good to hear that we've closed out a lot of the material recommendations. If it is concentrated in those two areas, and I'm sorry if I've misunderstood what you said, I would expect the outstanding recommendations to remain open until you had done the work, rather than closing them on the grounds that work will be done. Because if they haven't been completed, they haven't been completed, and that gives us the way to follow them through to either completion or changing them to a different recommendation, which is more appropriate given your further work. The question I did want to ask is, and I appreciate you may not have done the plan yet, but would you have any idea as to whether or not that work would be done towards the beginning or the end of the plan for the year? Because it would appear that given the status of these recommendations and considering all of the planning, it could be expedient to get them done earlier rather than later. Thanks.
Yeah, so thanks. So on the timing of the audit, yeah, we're not that far advanced with our plan, but actually, if we're seeing that those recommendations haven't been implemented, then that totally is a perfectly good rationale for earlier completion. In terms of the closure of the recommendations, so we've got various different closure categories or labels that we can apply. These won't be closed as implemented. They would be closed on the basis that we are incorporating them in further assurance work. So they're like in our notes that support our plan, that we would describe the fact that they were open. Open issues, but we can keep them there. It's just we won't necessarily be actively tracking them.
Thank you, Matt. Matt, as discussed in the call over, can you please confirm that you're going to raise all outstanding red recommendations to the chairs? Please.
Chair, I think that's something that I would take on.
Okay, so can you please confirm that to the committee?
Yes, I can confirm that an email will go to all the chairs.
Can you also confirm that going forward, all red recommendations which don't close by the target date will be escalated to the chairs? Thank you very much. Town clerk. Sorry. Item 9, please. Outstanding item 9 and 15. Yes.
So, Chair, thank you for this. And I did catch up with our auditors to understand their points around the management accounts. Unfortunately, what their expectation is that we provide a full set of management accounts. This is pretty much closing down each month on a monthly basis, including balance sheets as well. Our system doesn't allow us to do that and the ways of working. So this is something that I am looking at to take forward in relation to within our new system. However, we are providing monthly accounts or monthly reporting to SLT. There's quarterly reporting to our finance committee and also to other committees as well. So from that perspective, any issues that are being raised are done on a monthly basis, but I will be working with our auditors to ensure that they understand what we can and can't do. In addition to that, so as we are providing monthly information, I recommend that this item is now closed.
Thank you very much. Yes, start with Dan, please.
Thanks. That sounds really sensible, and I'd support your approach. Was it that that level of detail about their expectations wasn't known at the point you accepted the recommendation and you explored it afterwards? So I think it's for an accepted recommendation, and then you work through what it actually meant. Just to understand kind of the time frame. But I support what you've got to, because that's a pragmatic and a sensible approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Yes, Sonia.
That's exactly what happened.
Fantastic. Steve, please.
Thanks, Chair. Sonia, I'm just wondering how this compares to other. I know the corporation is very difficult to compare to anything else. It's completely unique. But how would this compare to, say, on the local authority side? Is that monthly close, including balance sheet and the whole works? Is that what other local authorities were doing if we just looked at a local authority?
So if I was to look at other local authorities, they don't usually close on a monthly basis, but this is something that we do probably need to look at in our new system and how we can do more of it. But with the complexity of our organisation and the consolidation of things, it becomes really, really difficult. So this is something, again, I will look at and come back to this committee as a recommendation.
Questions on this item? Yes, David, please.
Thank you, Chair. It was just on item on number 15, the member training. It says non-public appendix. I just wondered when an update can be, whether an update can be given now, whether there was a response from the Digital Services Committee, or whether that would be later in the non-public side of things.
Yes, so I think, members, we can close this recommendation as Digital Services Committee has advocated for the training for members on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And
the next one is on the agenda, so it's 17.
Yeah. Thank you, Caroline. Town Clerk, could we slightly reformat this report as we discuss in the call over, so that there's a separate column for target date, and if that is missed, then we have a column for the new date and then the status closed WIP. Because we need to know the new date if we are not going to close an item by the target date.
Yes, happy to do that, Chair.
Thank you.
So moving on to item 6 is the committee work programme, and this is for members to note.
Thank you, Town Clerk. Do members have any questions or comments on the report? Thank you, members. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So now we're moving on to item 7, the recruiting of external representative to the Audit and Risk Management Committee paper, and this is for decision.
Thank you, Town Clerk. Since this is for decision, Caroline, please could you provide a brief summary of the report and outline what you are asking members to approve?
So two main changes, and apologies that the second part of it doesn't come across well in the report. We had to do this extremely quickly to meet the deadline for reporting. But the first thing is how we have the vacancy advertised and for how long. So members, the intention here is to have a rolling campaign. The advantage of that is that we never actually close it until we've filled it. And the reason why that's important is that it can become quite an arbitrary cut-off, and we do know that there were suitable applicants who couldn't meet the deadline last time. And just with that whole process, it would also mean that officers would do the first stage of the interview panels to make sure that suitable applicants are the ones that are put in front of members on that basis. The second aspect is about how we go about recruiting, and we have since discovered in the strengthening of HR, we now have a headhunter that we have internally. So rather than using a headhunting agency, we have, because of the level of recruitment that's been done across the organisation, we have that tapped into our own procedures, and using that to that headhunter facility to be able to reach out to the relevant places rather than just having the adverts where we had been putting them before, but to actually reach out and speak to the candidates. Also picking up things like Whitehall in government, the places in which people who are looking for non-exec positions are also looking. So there may be more that we want to say in private session, but in public session, those are the key changes. I don't know, David, if there was anything further that you wanted to add on the arrangements.
I'd say that's a pretty comprehensive cover, to be honest. I know that Matt's going to be meeting with Kathy shortly. So.
Thank you, Caroline and David. Members, any questions? David, please.
Chair. I note that in the report it says we had 2 failed attempts to recruit a candidate. I don't know whether that was we turned them down or they turned us down. And I just wondered from the that just seemed a little bit light, only 2 candidates. And I just wondered whether there was any feedback from any of the candidates that we have spoken to up till now. And secondly, I just wondered whether there was we had any. I mean, if reference was made to suitable candidates that have missed a deadline, so does that mean that we didn't have at least a couple of potential candidates in the pipeline?
Caroline.
So I'll answer the second one first, because I think it's really important that in terms of networks and who we have been approaching as well and encouraging for application, that is absolutely the case. We do think that there are more people who would be interested in this role who just could not get an application in to the previous recruitment round. In answer to the question as to feedback, I think it would be more helpful if we could cover that in private session, and then we can yeah.
Thank you very much. Sounds good. Dan, please.
I support the paper, and I think a rolling basis is a good basis. I was going to make the point about networks and using informal approaches, but the Chamberlain covered that through, I think you said something in HR. Particularly, just to the point I wanted to make was this committee has always been really clear whether you're looking for the risk space or the audit space, and it's not often you'll get someone who'll cover both. And so I think there'll be different networks at play depending on what the skills you're after.
Thank you, Dan. Steve, please.
Thanks, Chair. Also support option A, the rolling recruitment, but I think I would just stress the urgency of this, with Dan obviously sadly leaving us in a few months' time, and that huge risk on Coracy if we don't recruit someone pronto. So very pleased to hear that we've now got this internal headhunter. Presumably that is the solution that enables us to find a larger pool of people far more quickly than in the previous 2 attempts.
Thank you, Steve. Gail?
I was just going to say the same thing that Steve did, fully support option A as well.
Well, members, thank you. So are we content to endorse option A? Thank you, Karen. Town Clerk, please.
Thank you, Chair. So now we move on to item 8, which is the risk management update, which again is for information.
Thank you, Town Clerks. Do members have any questions or comment on this report? Yes, Gail.
Thank you. I just had a very quick question because I noted that we don't have a specific EEDI risk, which I think is perfectly fine. I was just wondering if we could consider as to how we're getting that lens on the risks, as we mentioned, because I'm not sure if we have gotten enough of it to date, but appreciate that the whole risk management process is is being reorganized. So it's a comment or a question, I'm not sure which.
Thank you, Gail. Dion, please.
Thank you for the question. So we're looking at it in two different ways. One is we had the appointment of new head of equalities, director of equalities, reporting to my function, which is helpful because it sits alongside risk, with an item coming to the Chief Officer Risk Management Group. Firstly, just to probe whether or not we felt that there were potential areas that would escalate into a corporate risk or a high risk under the head of profession through the lens of equalities. That was the first part of it. That continues. We did have the discussion, I can't remember if it was the last Chief Officer Risk Management Group, thank you, particularly on this item. It was deemed that there wasn't a significant risk rising to a potential corporate level. As far as equalities were going, we were looking at the mitigations that were being put in place, both from the head of profession for equalities, but also the hub and spoke model that we have working with business embedded EDI experts. On the second part, which was the cross-cutting theme, so not just through the lens of EDI, but looking at all of the other risks and then putting the EDI lens on top of it. We're continuing to do that. So that will be an ongoing work. We won't cross it off the list at any point and say that it's done. We did look and we continue to look with the head of profession to see, are there any cross-cutting areas where this may come up? For example, when we talk in non-public around our finances, when you're looking at decisions of where to prioritise your funding, looking at impact on services, what does that mean through the lens of equalities? Is it disproportionately affecting underrepresented groups, as an example? So we will continue to do that. But the first part of it, where we wanted to test, because we did have a gap that we raised previously at this committee, it was not found to be a significant risk that would warrant attention at either a corporate risk level, departmental risk level, or at the head of profession area. So the rest of the work will continue.
Thank you very much, Dion. Yes, Timothy.
Thank you, Chairman. CR 16, page 43, cyber attack. Have you wargamed what would happen if they were to succeed? Do you have a plan? And if so, has it been documented? I noticed that Westminster is still suffering from its cyber attack nearly a month later. Thank you.
Thank you, Timothy.
Yes, so very timely, as we did do a test run within DITS on it, and some really helpful learning coming out of how to improve our not only the business continuity plan but also the disaster recovery plan. So yes, work is taking place on that.
Should it not be in this risk register then? Because I can't see it mentioned.
I think these were submitted. These papers were submitted well in advance of Christmas, and it was the week before Christmas when we carried out the work. So it's a hot topic right now, and we will update it in the next iteration of CR16. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Steve, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions, the same ones actually that Alderwoman Liz King has asked on the Teams chat. So in relation to CR35, which is there's a risk in particular in relation to City Fund and that the sustainability of City Fund, particularly after the government finance settlement announced just before Christmas, and also HRA. So I think the question is on both CR35, City Fund and that national government settlement and HRA, can we have an update? I know there is one in the papers, but can we have a bit of an update now on, because I know this is probably quite fast moving, where are we, what's the plan? And if we need to do some of that in private, then fine. But I think both I and Alderwoman Liz King have the same questions there. Thank you, Chair.
Steve, thank you very much. Dion, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have asked to come in first, just from the risk perspective, as opposed to the Chief Officer ownership perspective. We are going to cover this in non-public, the reason being that it relates to risk or links into risk appetite. Conscious that in some of the other committees, the high level, when you've got some information in here that is in the public domain, but for us to have a full conversation here, it would have to be in non-public. So we are going to cover it in more detail for all of those members that have asked specifically about CR35, but also related to HRA. I know, Chair, that there is a long question. I haven't read it yet. That's in the chat.
Okay, so we'll cover that. We'll cover that in the non-public section.
in public, I think what we can record is this is what happens when you have fast moving things within the public sector space, and committee reporting deadlines, which are before those events.
Thank you very much. Yes, Dan.
Thanks. I'm on page 40 of the pack. I just wanted to ask about assurance on the achievability of the target dates. So if you look at the current score and the target score, the kind of delta looks reasonable, given how much management is seeking to reduce the risk by. Some of the target dates are quite punchy, and by the time you've been through a few cycles, kind of you've lost a lot of time. And it's a strange thing to say. It's more reassuring when the target date's further out, because it means you can get hold of the issue and put stuff in place. So it was about the realism of a handful of the target dates that are really near term for quite long term risks.
Thank you very much, Dan. Dion, please.
Thank you for the question. I think it's a fair challenge, actually. One of the things that my team have been doing with the risk owners has also been looking at are the target dates for the risk in its entirety, or is it in relation to some of the mitigations? And some of those, there is a bit of a blurring or a process between the two. There was a huge amount of activity that was done just before Christmas. I know Chamberlain has already mentioned about the cut-off date for these reports versus the work that happened since. That included target dates, completion dates, some of the mitigations, some of the information that was contained, what should and shouldn't be in the public domain versus non-public, and so on. That will continue. I will take it back as well as part of the work that we do with the Risk Management Forum, just to keep emphasising that focus on the target dates and the realism of it. What we have noticed is let me put it in a different way. One of the things we focused on was making sure that the risks were updated regularly. That was the first point. The second point was, and what are you, the things that you're updating, is it achievable? Is it aspirational? And is it relevant to what we're saying are the mitigations? Now, there's still a little bit more work that needs to be done on that, as I've said. I think I will take it back to the Risk Management Forum, but we'll also put it on the agenda for the Chief Officer Risk Management Group as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Very helpful. Any other questions? Thank you, members. Shankar, over to you.
Chair, I believe Ruby has put a question on the chat.
I can't see the question.
Ruby, you are able to speak. It's just the voting rights, which you won't be able to do, if that helps.
Thank you. So I thought I wasn't able to speak, but again, some of the points that I've raised have been raised now by members. But basically, what I was saying, and again, I was just supporting what Gail had mentioned earlier about the agenda item 8, and in particular, what's been raised about CR 35 and at CR 42, which is the housing revenue account. It's already been raised. I think the targets that have been set seem very unrealistic, given when you look at the last review, these have been issues that have been constant for a significant period of time. I don't agree with matters being closed down on the basis that they'll then be opened in a different guise. I just don't think that's the right way of right approach of doing it, given that these have been significant issues which have been historic, and I just feel that by doing that, it takes away our ability to hold departments and senior officers to account when they have been outstanding, some of which from 2024. And I just don't feel that that's the right approach to take. I think it takes away from our ability to hold officers to account. I do think that needs to be re-looked at as to how we approach it. But again, a lot of what I've raised in the chat has been mentioned by members in any events. For example, just the how realistic it is that some of the target dates that have been set, and having a better understanding of what the plan is to reduce the risk when some of these have been outstanding for such a long time, and particularly given that some of the targets are to reduce by 50%. For in particular the CR 35 and CR 42. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruby. Dion, please.
Thank Thank you. Just to add to what I've said previously, just picking up on a couple of the points just made. One of the bits of work that we are doing at the moment is meeting with each of the chief officers responsible for the corporate risk in particular to do a deep dive into each one of the corporate risks. That will pick up the points that Ruby and other members have just said. I think what you're seeing is some of it is legacy around short-termism, which is where we fell into the trap of looking at issues as opposed to risks. And that's where some of the deadline dates are quite close. As I said before, I think some of the deadline dates are related to mitigating activities rather than the risk in its entirety. And that's something we'll pick up with the chief officers. But we have scheduled those one-to-ones with myself, my team and the relevant chief officer on the corporate risks, and then have that trickle through the rest of the risk management system. Thanks.
Thank you, Dion. Sounds good. Over to you, Town Clerk.
Thank you, Chair. So now we move on to item number 9, which is the Internal Audit Charter. And members are being asked to approve. Thank you.
Thank you, Town Clerk. Matt, please could you provide a brief summary of the report and outline what you're asking members to approve, please?
Thank you, Chair. This ties back to one of the points I made when we were talking about the terms of reference for the committee. So it's actually a requirement of the Global Internal Audit Standards that the Audit Committee, the Audit Risk Management Committee in the City of London Corporation approves the Internal Audit Charter and therefore gives Internal Audit its mandate. In terms of how we've presented the charter itself, it is quite a long document, but we have, as we did in the last year, we've taken the template internal audit charter that is provided by the standard setter. So, from our perspective, whilst it is a long read, that is the easiest way to make sure we meet all the criteria that are expected in the standards, and therefore that's a very useful way of us being able to demonstrate conformance with the standards, which we're also measured against. So what I'd say is there's limited wriggle room on the detail of the charter, and any potential revisions to that, we would need to consider whether that moves us away from the criteria that we are seeking to meet. So really the approval that I'm looking for from the committee is to just endorse that mandate, give me more mandate to go and deliver the internal audit service in accordance with the standards.
Thank you, Matt. Yes, Dan.
Thank you, Matt. I'm happy to approve it. It's a good document. I guess I just challenge you a little bit on the wiggle room point and encourage you to write a document that's for this organisation rather than kind of just adherence to the global standards, which are quite strict and there's not a lot of wiggle room. But I think the value of the charter is to this organisation in its context rather than as a kind of compliance charter. In that spirit, there are two bits where you might push back because of lack of wiggle room that I was thinking through. On the type of assurance, I couldn't see anything when internal audit switches into an advisory mode because you can't give any assurance, and you see that quite a lot in the public sector. Then the other bit is, if I think about all the work your team's done on the MI and the dashboard that's come to this committee, I think it's now in a really good place. And is there something about the nature of your reporting and it being fit for purpose to this committee? Because I think it's really matured and it's really readable, and I couldn't quite see that reflected in the charter. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Matt, please.
Yeah, thank you. So in relation to the context, we have actually got a document that provides a bit of a bridge there. So I guess it's we could look at how we perhaps incorporate in the background of the charter or as an introduction or something like that. So I think we can cover that point there. The point around the advisory stuff. So we have actually, there is a bit of a trend for us doing a bit more forward-looking work, which could it could be badged as advisory work rather than insurance work, but the way that we're actually delivering it is we're sort of doing it as more of like a real-time assurance. So we're where there might be a request for some support, we're looking at it through the assurance lens and saying that actually, we just package the work up slightly differently, so it's not advisory. Then we provide assurance as to how they intend to do things, actually make recommendations still, and it's a case of if those recommendations are taken on board, then that will result in the outcomes we're looking at. So we just sort of, we pitch it slightly differently. And the nature of the reporting, I'll have to think about how we incorporate in there, but it might. But I think it's a good point that we should. But I'll look to see if there's a space for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Timothy, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Accuse me of falling off my hobby horse, but I'm very keen to make sure that when internal audit has taken place and it's found not to be satisfactory, it should either be sent to this committee or to the Grand Committee responsible. And I think this should be written into the charter. Now, the officer's telling us that we can't change the charter, but take the point that Dan makes the point that it's not really written for us. But to my mind, there should be transparency. If you have an internal audit and it isn't satisfactory, it must go somewhere, and it's not reported here. I haven't seen any in the time that I've been on this committee. And I worry about page 111, where it says internal auditors disclose impairments of independence or objectivity at least annually. Well, it's like the horse has bolted and run off down the track. To my mind, that should be at the next meeting. I can't see that that's logical. I mean, clearly it's been written as a national document, but from our point of view, if that is the case, well, why can't we have a sort of effectively an addendum or a codicil added to it to add these points to it? I think this committee should see transparency, and if there is a problem, it should know as soon as possible. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Timothy. Matt, please.
Thanks. So I do communicate the outcomes of audit reviews in my quarterly update reports. And one of the things that's been agreed is that the detail, like I actually only report on detail for the limited assurance reviews. So like they're included within my regular reporting pack, and actually my update to the last committee was my Q2 update. That was the detail of the audit outcomes included in there, including a new format of report that I've introduced, which is the insight report. So that's a one-page summary report, which covers like the key findings, the themes from the recommendations, and also specific comment from me about like the relevance of those findings for the reader. And also, and I believe I did copy the whole of the committee on this correspondence, but I also wrote to the chairs of all of the committees of the City of London Corporation just a couple of months ago, advising them of this new report format, which I will be sharing with them when we issue a final report. So I picked up on the point that was raised at a previous committee, and that was the new process that I've developed. So that's in there as a process of communicating results from outcomes from audit work. The point around impairments, we make an annual declaration via the declaration of interest system that we have. All members of my team complete a return, and that requires us to either declare any potential conflicts or state a nil return. And the sorts of things that actually have been declared so far is where, say, in the past I've been a governor of a primary school, so they're the sorts of things that have been declared, but otherwise it's a nil return, and those go through to the Chamberlain as the relevant chief officer for approval. If anything were to change during the year, then we would make we're required to make a subsequent declaration. So like that's how we meet that criteria. And I guess if I can include within my annual report that we've had no perceived conflicts.
Thank you, Matt. Caroline, please.
Yes, I'm thinking it's quite similar to the external audit requirements as well, that is disclosed annually in the report to those charged with governance, that there have been no instances of independence being compromised. Members, I'm also thinking that there's a wider issue, which of course is that Matt is independent for this organisation. He reports to you. Yes, for pay and rations, he reports to me, but that is the reason why you also have that annual meeting with him, to make sure there has been no implications from management for any of his reporting to this committee. So it's your opportunity to probe that, and that is a private meeting between you and him. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So members, any other questions or comment? If not, are we content to approve the internal audit charter? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Moving on to item 10, the mid-year Treasury Management Review 2025 to 26. This is a report of the Chamberlain for information.
Thank you, Town Clerk. Do members have any questions or comment on this report? Thank you, members. Town Clerk.
Moving on to item 11, questions on matters relating to the work of the committee. I've not been informed of any questions in advance of the meeting, but do any members have any questions? Seeing none. Moving on to item 12, any other business that the chairman considers urgent. Is there any other business that members would like to raise now? Seeing none. Item 13, the final item in public session, is the exclusion of the public. Are members content to exclude the public? Thank you. Chairman, the live stream